This is Cam Barber, and you're listening to What's Your Message? A podcast where we chat about two things. Firstly, how messaging is used in our society to bring attention to ideas, products, causes, politics, and to leadership in general. And secondly, we're going to ask people about their challenges and their breakthroughs as they develop their public speaking skills. G'day listeners, this is Cam Barber and this is the What's Your Message podcast. I'm here with Craig Bruce and we're going to talk about Paul Hogan, and my headline of the day is that Australia owes Paul Hogan $5 billion.
In back tax?
No,
okay.
We probably shouldn't go
there.
I've
read that story.
But whatever the tax situation is, pay your taxes, but we owe him $5 billion. So take the taxes from that, because he's generated, and we're going to break this down why I believe this is true, maybe $50 to $100 billion for the Australian economy over a 20 or 30 year period.
50 to 100 billion?
That's my claim.
Jeez, mate, prove it. Come on. Where do you want to start?
So the short answer is, in proving this, is that Paul Hogan he wrote, he conceived, he wrote, and he performed a range of tourism commercials for the United States market. And there was one commercial that was played 20 times, 30 times more often. Within that, he embedded a number of messages into the mind of the United States market.
Populace, yeah.
The United States populace, 300 million people. That benefited Australia. That not only increased tourism dramatically, because they were measuring that, but made it much easier. He opened the doors for businesses, business people, actors, anybody wanting to do business in the United States. In fact, here's another catchy message line, Craig. Not only did Paul Hogan open the doors for business success for Aussies in America, he convinced all 300 million Americans to welcome us with open arms.
Right. He changed perceptions, didn't he?
He absolutely changed perceptions. Right, let's have a look. So the history of Paul Hogan is that, we know he painted the Harbour Bridge. It's a great story, good messaging story, everyone remembers that. And then he had great success with a sketch comedy show in Australia. Mm-hmm. Now, he applied his wonderful skills, his messaging skills, to advertising. In Australia, he advertised a cigarette brand. Anyhow, have a Winfield.
Have a Winfield.
And then he stopped doing that when, cigarette smoking became, accepted as bad.
Yep.
But he, in the United Kingdom, had great success advertising Foster's Lager. In fact, he was the guy that pretty much built Foster's as the Australian brand. And guess what the message was there?
It's Australian for beer, is that?
That's it, but say it like Paul Hogan, mate. So here's how the ad works. So he does something funny, he chats to camera, he's friendly and likeable, yep. And then he sort of raises a glass and says, Foster's, it's Australian for beer.
Is there anywhere in the ad where he talks about Australians not drinking that rubbish, or does that ever mention any of those ads?
Okay. And that's a great secret. Please don't tell the audience.
So Pommies come out here wanting to buy a Foster's, and we look at them sideways going, what the hell's that about?
Yeah, so listeners, no one drinks Foster's in Australia. Does anybody drink Foster's? Yeah. I don't think I've seen it for a decade.
No.
But all over the world, that's the Australian brand.
Yep.
Because Paul Hogan put that into our heads.
It's perception.
Think about that great message. Foster's, it's Australian for beer. So you're literally thinking Australian beer is Foster's. Mm. And all the positive association with the friendly Australians linked to that.
The other thing that you can notice with the Winfield and Foster's messaging is just the simplicity of the message as well. Was it 4 words? Anyhow, have a Winfield, and Foster's, it's Australian for beer. None of this is difficult, is it? It's a very clear, simple message.
Well, it sometimes is difficult to get it that clear, but when it's there, it's not complicated.
No.
Yeah. So this was the history. So I think you can see really from the start that Paul Hogan had messaging skills. He just knew that this was a way to write interesting scripts for his sketch comedy show. He instinctively, it seems, knew how to do advertising. And so he applied these skills not only to the Crocodile Dundee movie, but that came later, which he wrote and started, but this tourism campaign. So let's talk briefly, before Hogan, BH we might call it, the perception, let's pick America because that was the market he targeted with this tourism campaign. The perception of Australians and Australia prior to Paul Hogan, so we're talking 1982, 83, we had a little bit of success with the band who said Down Under.
Yes.
Vegemite Down Under.
Men at Work.
Yeah. We had some success with the America's Cup, although not a lot of Americans really knew that.
That was around
much
83,
about.
wasn't it?
That was 83. That was big for Australia. It wasn't quite as big as a perception, but there were certainly some positives. But take those two positives out, and the perception of Australia was, we don't know where you are. We think you're convicts. Aren't you all convicts? Isn't that how it all started? And aren't the men chauvinistic, call all the girls Sheila, and drink too much beer?
Yep.
So it really wasn't a positive perception. And if you went in to do business or to be an actor or to try and do a deal, that generally negative perception wasn't working for you. I mean, the first thing is uncertainty. I don't know you.
Yeah.
Is it a real country? Oh, and the bar in New York, we talked about this. So I'll tell the story. So Paul Hogan was travelling in the United States and he's having great success with the Foster's ads in London and in the UK. And he's sitting at a bar and chatting to an American in New York City. And the guy said, that's a funny accent. Are you English? He goes, no, I'm Australian. And he goes, oh, Australia. And Paul Hogan said, oh, it's a lovely place. You should come and visit. And the guy said, can you go there now?
Brilliant.
So that really sums up the perception.
Right.
What is it?
Yeah, a bit unsophisticated.
Do you have cars? Do you have electricity? We don't really understand that you're a modern society. So he came back and he determined that we needed to change that perception, that tourism would be a great thing because Australia is this amazing, beautiful country.
Yeah.
So he conceived himself a campaign and took it to the Australian Tourism Board.
Oh, so this was off his bat. So he's developed the idea, and he went to the Australian Tourism Board.
He absolutely did. In fact, there's a video you can find on YouTube. We must put it in the link.
Yeah.
Which is his video pitch to the Tourism Board.
Okay, I just always assumed it would have been the other way around, where they've come to him and gone, we've had success here and here, why don't you come up with an ad?
That's what I've heard most often, and in fact I was even on a plane sitting next to a guy and I was chatting about messaging and telling him about how interesting it is, and I mentioned Paul Hogan and he said, well, I sit on the board of the Australian Tourism Commission, you better give them some credit. And I said, well, you do know that he pitched it to them. He said, I did not know that.
Wow.
So that sort of that idea is lost, but the video exists. It was his pitch. So he had a video that he played them, then he went and had a meeting and he basically said, listen, we're going to convince Americans that Australians are the friendliest people on earth and that we've got all these great places to visit, but we're friendly and we're going to welcome you. And they looked at the pitch and they looked at the documents and they said, well, Paul Hogan, famous, clever guy, in Australia, this sounds great, but there's nothing in your pitch document about your fee. What are you going to charge us? And I just love his response, because his response is actually messaging that positions his fee really high. Here's what he said. Yeah, the fee. Look, that's a problem because you can't afford me.
Right.
And then with a well-timed pause, and he said, so I'm going to do it for free.
Okay.
How good does that position him, right? So number one, he said, my fee's millions and you can't afford it. But two, I'm such a great bloke, I'm going to do it for free. But then he said, so if I'm going to do it for free, you better spend a fortune on these campaigns.
Yeah, and on my personal brand at the same time.
Absolutely correct. So look, I'm not saying he did it all for Australia. He obviously was aware that if he could build his own profile and be on 10,000 ads,
that is genius.
He might be able to, say, produce a film that would be successful in America.
Right. Do you think that was he thinking about Crocodile Dundee at that point?
I think he was thinking about a film or a TV show.
Right.
So what he did in the UK was he ran the ads for Foster's, and then his sketch comedy show was syndicated in the UK, so he was making money over there. So I don't know whether he thought about whether he just gets his show over there or whether the movie was happening, but yes, he ultimately wrote and starred in Crocodile Dundee.
So the TV commercial, so it rolled out, was it 1984?
1984. Would you like to hear it, Craig?
Mate, I'd love to.
America, you look like you need a holiday. A fair dinkum holiday. In the land of wonder. The land down under. Now, there's a few things I've got to warn you about. Firstly, you're going to get wet. Because the place is surrounded by water. Oh, and you're going to have to learn to say g'day. Because every day's a good day in Australia.
G'day, Paul.
G'day, love. Apart from that, no worries. You'll have the time of your life in Australia. Because we talk the same language. Although you lot do have a funny accent. Come on, come and say g'day. I'll slip an extra shrimp on the barbie for you.
So innocent, isn't it? That even that music, it's like a children's show music with the little doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. You know, it's so gentle and casual and
friendly. And what you're missing
playful
there in podcast land is the visuals that go along with this, which are, you know, when he says, you know, hey, you're going to have to realise that you're going to get wet because we're surrounded by water. There's these magnificent shots of the beaches, and he's always smiling and friendly. So just we'll probably play it again. Actually, not straight away. I want to point out a couple of things. Do you know how many times he gets the line "G'day" in there?
Maybe 4 or 5.
6 times.
Is it? Oh wow. Okay.
So you don't know that. I mean, it's not like you forced it. It was forced or it was uncomfortable. It's just that it was written so well that he said, that's what I want to get in their head, g'day, g'day. And in fact, I think it still runs. There's the g'day yearly event.
The Say G'day?
The Say G'day thing.
Australian. Yeah.
So he designed that. You must know shrimp on the barbie, so
yes.
That's sort of the end. But he also put in there no worries. Now, we might have to do some more research on this, but no one in America said no worries in 1984, yet everyone in America says no worries. I mean, I've been to about 6 states in the last 12 months, and it seems to be just within the language now.
Oh, their language, not they don't say it because they're talking to you as an Australian. They don't use it.
They think they think they invented it.
Right. I mean, the other thing I love about shrimp on the barbie is being from, I don't know what you guys use in Melbourne, but in South Australia, it's a prawn. Is that?
Oh, of course. Well, that's another good. That actually shows good messaging. So in Australia, no one calls them a shrimp. Sorry, my American listeners, did you know that? So we don't even call it a shrimp, we call it a prawn, but the American market was the target, so
yes.
he used their language.
Right.
But he did use Barbie, so, you know, that had to be converted, barbecue was converted to Barbie. And also what you missed by not seeing the visual, and we'll definitely put the link to this ad into the podcast notes, is this gorgeous girl. So when he does g'day, so he comes out, he says, you know, you're going to get wet because the place is surrounded by water. And then he walks out of the beach. He's on the sand, there's the water in the background. And he says, and you're going to have to learn to say g'day. And there's this gorgeous girl walking up behind him. And just after that, she says, oh, g'day, Paul. And he goes, oh, g'day, love.
Yep. by his first name as well, so it's very personal and personable. Yeah.
So 6 times. So I'm playing it again. Have a listen for the number of times g'day is in there. Down under, no worries, shrimp on the barbie, etc. They're all in here. The perceptions that in the American mind all come from this one ad.
America, you look like you need a holiday. A fair dinkum holiday. In the land of wonder. The land down under. Now there's a few things I've got to warn you about. Firstly, you're going to get wet. Because the place is surrounded by water. Oh, and you're going to have to learn to say g'day. Of course, every day's a good day in Australia.
G'day, Paul.
G'day, love. Apart from that, no worries. You'll have the time of your life in Australia. Of course, we talk the same language. Although you lot do have a funny accent. Come on, come and say g'day. I'll slip an extra shrimp on the barbie for you.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It goes to where in the US in 1984. So, and what happens, or what happened?
So there's a telephone number on the bottom of the ad. So it wasn't just, hey, brand me around the world. It was literally, let's measure the results. Mm-hmm. Let's see how many phone calls we can get from people who say, I want to book a vacation in Australia. And the numbers were incredible. So it was a measured marketing success. And when you, I always love the line about when people say, what's your marketing budget? Is it a percentage of your turnover? No, your marketing budget is unlimited. You do tests, and when you find something that works, you just keep throwing money at it until it stops working.
Yep.
So that's what they did. And they got these incredible results. So they just kept throwing money at it, realising that the millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in benefit from the tourism were happening. Now, here's something interesting. So I think Paul Hogan's obviously a genius, but there was one thing that he was overrode, one thing where the Australian Tourism Board overrode him, in that he wanted to create new ads all the time.
Oh, okay.
And there are 3 or 4 or 5 that were created, but they kept coming back to this first one. And Paul Hogan was concerned that would typecast him and not look good. And he said, what are you, crazy? 5 years later, 1989, 1990, they're still running the same ad. Mm-hmm. And he was even quoted in the newspaper and on the media saying they're crazy, they should change their mind. I think he was wrong on that one. It's the repetition of those same friendly ideas with the smiling face that helped have such a strong impact.
Yeah, I agree. There's a warmth about it, and we've seen it 3 or 4 times in the preparation for this discussion today. And you can. It's one of those ones you can just watch over and over again, can't you?
We were singing the end. Come and say g'day.
Yeah, it's incredible. So, 85 until sort of the early 2000s, Australia was on a roll, both from an American perspective and internationally.
I think so. I think you can measure this. So Paul Hogan personally, Crocodile Dundee came out in 86. It was a massive hit. 87, he hosted the Oscars, which is huge. He was really became very famous. He was hobnobbing. And there's a little story there that I wanted to tell. Clint Eastwood, who is hounded. Well, he talks about how it's great to be famous and successful, but everybody who meets him...
Go ahead, make my day.
Go ahead, make my day. So, and they all think it's the first time anyone's thought of it. So he actually came up to Paul and said, welcome to my world, mate.
Right.
Because what's the line from Crocodile Dundee?
Yeah, that's not a knife.
That's not a knife. Now that's a knife. And so I don't know if you're listening, do you remember that line? Because that exists in the social consciousness still to this day.
Public speaking has evolved, and most people haven't caught up. Fortunately, there is a book to guide you. The book is called What's Your Message by Cam Barber. It's available in paperback, ebook and audio formats, and it dispels the myths of the traditional approach to public speaking and gives you a simple 3-part method for success. What's Your Message helps you dissolve public speaking anxiety and promises to give you twice the impact with half the effort. What's Your Message by Cam Barber. Available at Amazon and all good bookstores.
So Paul had great success, but coming back to this argument that Paul Hogan gave us 20 years of success, of a brand that just oozed positivity and success, and we were welcomed. So what did you have? You've got actors, Nicole Kidman, Hugh Jackman, the Helmsworth. I mean, there's that many Australian actors that have succeeded. And what happened is, one actor, or let's say a business person, whether you're an actor or a business person, I think there's a feedback loop that's very important. Let's say we go back to BH, before Hogs, 1982, and you go to America, you travel great distances, and you say, hey, let's do a business deal. And the people who are there are like, Australia, yeah, do you have cars? Do you have electricity? It's not quite that bad. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but it's not a welcoming.
It's not a safe bet, is it?
No, it's sort of an uncertain bet. Well, if you're from England, I know England's big. Yeah. But Australia, I really don't know what you do, what you are, what you're good for. So there's a hesitation. And when an Australian goes over and sees that hesitation, he probably comes back with, well, it's a tough gig over there. Pitching the business or getting into Hollywood, it's a tough gig, tough to get in the door. So I'm arguing that, from about 85, 86 onwards into the 90s, and I guess to this day in many ways, that changed. That feedback loop completely changed, because instead of walking up to someone to pitch your acting skills or to pitch your business and them saying, hello, who are you? Without prompting, they say, g'day, mate. Yep. Shrimp on the barbie. And they're smiling as they say it. And so I think there's this feedback loop where the Australian sees that smile, that welcoming welcome. Can I say that? And just has more confidence, and their ideas are heard. And then they go back to Australia and go, you know what? The American market's not that hard.
What about from their perspective, when you set such a clear expectation as Paul Hogan did in those ads, for most Australians, we're not necessarily like Hogs. I mean, Hogs is an exaggerated version of all of us, isn't he, really? Do you think clearly that wasn't an issue, but I wonder how that played out.
Well, I hope they're not disappointed when they see me. I'm as charming as Hogs, aren't I? Aren't you, Craig?
I don't think so.
Yes, we all are.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
do you know what's funny? Confirmation bias. We should talk about this for a whole podcast another time. Confirmation bias, and what I sometimes call the closeness problem, is that when you believe something to be true, You see it everywhere. A fact, which let's say is neutral, when you believe something, that fact will confirm your existing bias.
Yes.
So I remember I learnt this when I studied marketing many years ago from L. Rees and Jack Trout, with the great book called Positioning: The Battle for Your Mind. Wonderful book. You should go and get it. It's short, easy to read, brilliant. And they said, branding is about perception. So in America at the time, I think this was in the 80s where the book was written, they said the perception is that American cars break down a lot and Japanese cars don't break down. And he said the facts actually don't really back that up. But if you believe it and you've got a Japanese car and it breaks down, you go, how unlucky am I? Hey?
Right.
I mean, I got a Honda and it still broke down. That's just bad luck. But if you've got a Dodge and it breaks down, you're like, bloody American cars, you know, this sucker broke down. Because you're not looking for the facts. Are you searching for the actual statistics? No. Branding is a perception, messaging is a perception, and the facts simply confirm your bias. So you know what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, I can hear you.
They think we're more charming than we are.
Yeah, it's great. We all win. But what about, and this is the interesting thing with Hogs, can you think of another single individual that essentially became the brand ambassador of a country? I mean, when you think of Canada, who do you think of? When you think of the UK, who do you think of? When you think of France, who do you think of? I mean, he carried the entire bloody country.
He represents
on his shoulders.
the country to so many people.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah, it's amazing. And we're trying to bring this to life. You know, we all know Hogs was a great guy and was really successful, but I think when you break it down, we owe him $5 billion.
Right,
and
$5 billion.
All that is 5 or 10% of what he brought us.
So where are we at now then? I'm trying to think of what we've been doing in recent years from a brand perception and from a marketing point of view. I mean, how is Australia seen?
Well, I have an opinion on this. So I've been, for the last 2 years, I've been travelling, working in the US quite a bit. I published a book called What's Your Message on public speaking, and that has opened a door for me. So I think I've visited, well, in 2 years, I've probably visited 15 different states and made 10 or 12 visits, which I've found wonderful because America's so diverse. You know, they're really, if you just go to LA and New York, I mean, they're different in themselves, but, you know, going to the Midwestern states and to Florida and to Texas and to Indiana and to Salt Lake City, you know, this is where you get a different opinion. I've found it very helpful. But I've got a controversial view here. I think the Hogs perception started to fade in the early 2000s. They stopped playing the Paul Hogan ads.
Yeah.
His star in terms of being a movie star faded. The movies in the 90s weren't as successful. And then I think, and I don't want to be negative here, but I'll tell you my opinion. The Australian Tourism Board ran a campaign in 2006, if I've got that right.
Oh, okay, Lara Bingle.
Lara Bingle, who's lovely, and the pictures of the country were beautiful.
Yeah,
but
they were.
Tagline was, "Where the bloody hell are you?"
Yeah, I remember it being controversial when it came out.
Well, I just think it's probably possibly the worst decision that was ever made in marketing, because what did Paul Hogan say he was going to do and then do better than anyone possibly on the planet? Mm-hmm. He said, I'm going to convince the Americans, I'm going to convince the world that we're the friendliest people on earth. Now, the perception that existed, even if you look in Wikipedia, there's a line. Where's that line, Craig? Hang on.
Propensity for vulgarity.
A propensity for vulgarity. That perception still exists for Australians. So the view was Australians descended from convicts. They drink a lot.
Uncouth,
and they have a propensity for vulgarity.
Yep.
So Paul Hogan rightly changed that.
So he wasn't just shifting a perception; he was literally flipping it on its head, wasn't he?
Correct.
Which is where you're not talking about just an adjustment, a shift one way or the other. It's literally flipping the thing on its side.
Good point. He did it, and that was his goal, and he achieved it with amazing success. And so then, what are we doing? We're running a campaign with a swear word in it.
So take me inside what you would think may have happened in that marketing session, because there would have been a lot of smart minds in that meeting. And I can imagine it would have been something around, let's be authentic, let's be real, let's speak like real Australians, possibly. I mean, how could you have landed on that line as a group of experts, marketing experts, messaging experts, and think that could work?
Well, I guess it's a little shocking, so they might have thought it will stand out.
Yeah.
I could speculate, but I would just be speculating. I think there's a more important point. all my work is focused on messaging, and I think when you look at messaging and you learn about how it works and how it sticks in the mind and why it sticks in the mind or why it doesn't, you can then look at the world and say, the messaging lens, if I just look at the messaging and I look at the mind of the listener that I want to impact, you get an insight. You can make certain predictions, you can be guided. And so if the perception in the mind is friendly, I don't understand how you can put a swear word in there.
Yeah, sure.
And then I can't also understand what good you think that would do. So if you don't understand the way the mind works and the way it retains messages and that there's an emotion that goes with those words, if you don't understand that, and I'll put it another way, I don't think they understood that when they said, let's come up with a catchy phrase. They've missed perhaps one of the key elements of understanding messaging, which is how does this sit in the mind of the listener?
Yep.
So I don't know what they did, I don't know what they were thinking, but I think it was a huge mistake. And so it ran for 2 or 3 years, they put hundreds of millions of dollars behind it, and they saw the numbers go down, and then it was cancelled.
Right. So there's been a messaging vacuum for many years now, and what has been left in its place?
Okay, great point, Craig. I love the discussion about messaging vacuum because, yes, you can, and I think you and I talked about the 2016 United States election.
Yes.
And in a messaging vacuum, Donald Trump is very good at messaging, right? Whether you don't like 99% of what he does or you don't like the message, he knows how to do it. And he was able to embed a number of messages into people's minds that they had a perceived benefit. Now, if he wasn't great at messaging, the normal political Clinton campaign with its vague messaging, so if that vague messaging was going against a vacuum, probably would have won.
Yep.
But it wasn't going against a vacuum, it was going against an expert in messaging. Mm-hmm. So the messaging vacuum is also important. It's not just what message have you got in there, is there nothing in there?
Yeah.
Is there really nothing there? And if there's nothing in there, then it's possible for other people or other influences to control or to fill it. And that's what I think is currently happening. Because when I talk to people now, often, without even prompting, but I do prompt, I say, well, Australia, what's your perception of Australia? 9 times out of 10, I still get, "G'day mate, shrimp on the barbie," but that's reducing, and what's taking over is, oh, crikey, they don't say crikey, do they? They say, hey, the spiders and the snakes, haven't you guys got the smallest, deadliest animals on anywhere?
Yes. Where are they getting that from, though?
They're getting it from the National Geographic Channel or whatever those channels are.
Yeah.
So, because they rate.
Yeah.
Fear, drama, the deadly. It's only this big, but it could kill 15 people, right? So you're going to watch that show.
Yeah.
And so because our messaging is not clear at the moment, that's taking over, which is not a good thing.
So we've got a lot to thank Paul Hogan for.
We have, mate. I think we have. Thank you, Paul. And, maybe we should be calling Paul Hogan and saying, all right, we're in a vacuum.
Yeah.
We haven't got it right.
Is he going to work for free this time or not?
Yeah, that's a good no. His fee might be up. Well, we're going to give him $5 billion anyway.
Yeah, we owe him
Let's say he's got to do it for that. So look, my wrap-up message here is that Paul Hogan not only opened the door for Australian success in America, he convinced 300 million people to welcome us with open arms. And I don't know how often that's been done. I think it's an amazing success.
Well done, mate.
Thanks, Craig.
Good.
If you enjoyed the What's Your Message podcast, please take a moment to give us a rating on iTunes. Ratings are the best way to help share these ideas, and we would be most grateful for your help. My book is called What's Your Message, and it really is fantastic. It shows you how to speak with twice the impact using half the effort. It's available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats on Amazon and at all good bookstores. For information on training options and coaching products, please go to vividmethod.com. That's vividmethod.com. This is Cam Barber, and remember, persuasion is built on message recall. So, what's your message?